Hi everyone, Astro Marmot here, and today I have a question for you. What is time? No, seriously, someone help me out here because apparently I am really bad at it. The passage of time is a mystery to me, and as it turns out, to many other people with ADHD as well. What is time? What does it seem to pass differently for me than it does for other people? And how does my inability to note time's passing affect me as a game master? You'll be unsurprised to know that time blindness, as it's called, is a common symptom of ADHD. It's defined as an inability to sense how much time has passed and to estimate how much time something will take. This shows up in our lives as chronic lateness, impatience with waiting, failure to meet deadlines, procrastination, and difficulty prioritizing tasks. You know that feeling when you have an appointment at 3 p.m. and it basically paralyzes the rest of your day as you wait for it? That's time blindness in action. If all of that sounds central to your experience with ADHD, you're not alone. However, despite this being a commonly described experience of ADHD, time blindness is at best treated as a secondary symptom of the condition, if it's discussed at all. One study I read suggested strongly that time perception be included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as a focal symptom of ADHD, arguing that temporal shifts in cognitive processing may be at the very root of ADHD-related symptoms. In other words, ADHD may itself be a disorder of timing in the brain. Research on this topic is scant, and what research is out there is generally focused on children rather than adults, despite plenty of evidence that these symptoms persist into adulthood. Regardless of how the DSM treats it, I think it's safe to say that distortion of time is central to whatever is happening in our unique electric skull soup. And this distortion shows up in several different time-related aspects of our lives. According to the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, time blindness can include challenges with time estimation, which includes both figuring out how much time has passed as well as guessing the amount of time a task will take. Time horizon, which is what helps us determine how quickly a deadline is approaching and when to start acting on it. Time management, which is the process of planning and coordinating how much time you spend on activities. This one is especially difficult because it involves several executive functions that are often implicated in ADHD. Time sequencing, which is the ability to put things in the correct order that they occurred, and time reproduction, or the ability to repeat a task at the same amount of time. That's right, there are people out there who are just naturally good at these things. I am not one of them, and I am nakedly envious of people who are. It takes a lot of cognitive work for me to show up on time for anything, even things I want to be doing. My natural instinct is to live in the moment, and in the moment, time doesn't exist. But of course it does, and I find myself playing catch up to keep up with others. This is a frustrating way to live your life, and one that I'm sure more than a few of you can relate to. A quick Google search of time blindness will pull up dozens of articles, each offering solutions to this issue, most of which boil down to use a timer and fall in love with clocks. This isn't bad advice. I live and die by timers in my daily life, but it's more of a tool than an actual solution. Timers won't help me estimate the amount of time something will take. Timers won't make that 3 p.m. appointment any less of a black hole in my day's schedule. And this is especially an issue when it comes to time blindness and being a game master. Because while some aspects of game mastering can be helped with the proper application of a timer, and we'll talk about that, some of the ways that time blindness affect us in the game can't be helped by an app on your phone. And we'll talk about that too. But let's start with some above the table problems created by time blindness, and we might as well start with an obvious one: showing up to the session on time. This used to be my downfall. Something about the nerves I get before a session, combined with my inability to read time at all, would lead me to delay starting the game for sometimes upwards of an hour. It was just so hard for me to get past that mental threshold and say, all right, it's game time. This isn't easy for me to admit, by the way. I was like this for a lot longer than I want to admit, and my poor, long-suffering players just accommodated me. Which was incredibly sweet of them, but more than I should be asking from anyone. I mean, I run a good game, but it's not so great that you should stand in line for an hour just to play. So what cured me of my chronic lateness? Well, it's not a solution I can honestly recommend to other people, nor one that's easy to port into your life. The simple answer is I started playing with someone who was worse than I was, and it straightened me out real quick. Seeing the way that their lateness impacted the other players made me realize I needed to change for the sake of everyone at the table. I set up strict rules for myself and the table. For in-person games, I would arrive an hour early, and for virtual games, I was online 5 minutes before official game time. Since I was dealing with another person with ADHD, I wanted to be sensitive to their difficulties with time blindness as well, so I set a 10-minute buffer at the beginning of the games. That's the time we socialize, and then the game starts. This was challenging for that particular player, but after being late a few times and realizing we would no longer wait for them, they managed to do better. This is an aspect of GMing where timers are a big help. I have a schedule for myself on game days that I don't deviate from, and that regularity helps me to get my butt in the hot seat in time for a game to start. While I no longer play with that particular player, I'm genuinely grateful that they help me to see my actions from an outside perspective. I don't think find yourself a player who's worse at time than you are is especially actionable advice. Instead, I hope my experience can be instructive and help you to reassess your game day schedule if you struggle with being on time for your own sessions. I know it's hard because you don't feel ready, but that feeling of not being prepared, not knowing if you've really got it all together, it never really goes away. You just get used to it. 30 more minutes is not going to make a difference. It's just going to compound your anxiety for when you do actually start. I don't know, maybe this is a highly personal problem and other GMs don't suffer from it, but if you're among those who do, just know you're not alone, and it is possible to grow out of it. Get you a schedule and a timer, and you're 80% of the way there. And then that time you used to spend worrying becomes more time spent gaming with your friends. And that's all anybody really wants. This applies equally if, rather than being the person who is late, you're dealing with a player who is chronically late. What we're really talking about here is creating and holding to a routine. Game time is 2 p.m., and we start the game at 2:10 p.m., whether everyone is there or not. You can't force a routine onto another person, but you can make it easier for them to create their own routine that enables them to be present at the right time. Obviously, you should communicate with your player to find out if there's a reason for their tardiness and make accommodations as needed. But if you're dealing with someone else's time blindness, I can't emphasize enough how important a settled routine is to helping them break out of it. You as the game master get to decide when the game starts. Make it a consistent thing. Do not deviate from your schedule, and your problem player will either self-correct or self-select themselves out of your game. Of course, you have to be on top of your schedule for this to work, but the more something becomes a routine, the less willpower it takes to make it happen. It just becomes part of the fabric of life for you and your players. When it comes to conquering time blindness, routines are your friend. Establish a clear and consistent routine, and your whole table will thank you. But like I mentioned before, there are aspects of being a game master which are affected by time blindness that can't be helped by a good timer. I'm talking about timing in the game itself. I'm talking about pacing. One of the hardest things to learn as a new GM is when to cut a scene off and when to let it play out. Scenes that meander on past their purpose are a drag and are not fun for the table. It would be easy if the solution was to jump to a new scene every time there's dead air, and for many games that's exactly what you do. But in the kind of campaigns I run, I like to leave space for the PCs to interact not just with the world, but with each other. A little bit of air in your scenes isn't always a bad thing. With a little encouragement and the right players, they'll fill that space with engagement that leads to tighter party bonds. Pacing is an advanced art form that takes experience to get right. The Alexandrian's excellent series of articles on the art of pacing, linked in the description, says skip the boring stuff and get to the next meaningful choice is all you really need to know about pacing in an RPG. This is followed by 6 lengthy but quality posts detailing why it's not quite that simple, but as a maxim it's worth paying attention to. Role-playing games are guided by choices. Choices are what move the narrative forward. If the scene doesn't have a meaningful choice in it, if there's no question being asked by the scene that the players seek to answer, it may be time to move forward to a new scene. My experience with new game masters is that they will tend to let a scene run on long past its purpose. There's no natural instinct for when to cut a scene off. That's something you develop over time by playing. On the flip side, there's a percentage of GMs who will move from scene to scene so rapidly that the players don't have time for meaningful engagement with each other. I've been in games where I wanted to discuss what just happened with my fellow party members, but wasn't given any space by the GM to have those conversations. This is equally as frustrating as a scene that just plays out interminably. On the one hand, nothing is happening and players get bored as they wait for the scene to end. On the other hand, too much is happening and there's no space to digest it. How do we go about finding that sweet spot in the middle? If we're following the maxim that each scene should have a choice in it, you could break it down into a pretty simple formula. Frame each scene around a choice, wait for players to make their choice, either leave space for discourse or transition the scene to the next meaningful choice. The tricky bit is the third one, but one answer lies with your players. They will, through their roleplay and body language, tell you when a scene is done. Some players, like me when I get to be one, really enjoy inter-party discussion and will happily roleplay out a conversation about what we just experienced. Other players don't need that. They're looking for the next big choice to make. Know which kind of players you have. In a perfect world, they're all one kind or the other, but you may have a mix of player types, and in that case, you need to pay special attention to whether conversations are going on for longer than half your table would like. A gentle, "are we ready to move forward?" is usually enough to bring my table in line. Let me emphasize that this is all heavily contingent not just on which game you're running, but the style you like to run that game in. I'm currently wrapping up a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game that is heavily political and features way more talking than the average D&D game. A lot of times scenes are just the players talking about the politics of the world that they're in and adding things to their conspiracy board. There's no meaningful choice to be had, but it would be wrong for me to interrupt those scenes because those conversations are necessary for them to navigate the mystery of the campaign. Running this module forced me to change the way I normally pace games, and I'll have to do some readjusting once the campaign is over and I'm playing a more standard adventure. But that's what this adventure needed, so I was willing to change my style in order to meet the needs of the table. And that's what it comes down to, knowing the needs of your table, both overall and during play. Are you running a one-shot? There's probably no time for discourse. Are you running a political thriller? Definitely leave time for the players to talk amongst themselves. In the moment, as a scene is unfolding, ask yourself, what is the choice this scene presents to the players? Have they made that choice? If so, is it time to move on? I wish there was an easy formula I could give you to make pacing a breeze, but in truth, it just comes with experience and by paying attention to the unique needs your table presents. However, if you pay attention to your players and try to move each scene from meaningful choice to meaningful choice, you'll have a good baseline from which to work. Time blindness is difficult to manage, but thankfully not impossible. The best thing you can do to manage it above the table is to establish strong routines for your game and when it's played. Have a regular start time and hold to that start time. Be the anchor around which your table forms. In-game, pay attention to whether a scene is dragging and be willing to move on to the next meaningful choice. While you can't use a timer to help your in-game pacing, you can keep an eye on your players and develop an instinct for when it's time to cut and move forward. With enough practice, it becomes second nature. Just like showing up on time does once you've established your routine. Both of these things, timeliness and pacing, are affected by time blindness, but with a little work, they can be overcome. Thanks for watching the video today. This was a tough one for me because I still don't feel like I've mastered time in my own life. If you have ways of managing your own time blindness, please leave them in the comments so I can crib from them and improve myself. Special thanks to all my channel supporters for keeping my dream of this channel alive. If you like this content, consider heading over to ko-fi.com/astralmarmot and buying me a cup of tea, or even becoming a monthly subscriber. You can also like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks again for watching. Go get yourself a glass of water, and may the eccentricities of time be forever on your side. And unclench your jaw.